does the book of Hebrews teach that Jesus was a sinner by accident? That's what I'm going to talk about in today's video. And hopefully this will help you understand how to read the Bible thoughtfully and not fall into these traps which some people fall into at times. So I was watching something recently and I can't pinpoint exactly what it was, but this is what spurred me to make this video, because it was a question about a particular passage in Hebrews. It references a passage in the Old Testament, which we'll look at as well. And based on this, one of the conclusions, one of the questions that was then presented was, is this basically saying that Jesus was in fact a sinner based on what Hebrews is actually saying? So in today's video, we're going to read the passage in Hebrews, then we're going to read the Old Testament reference, and then I'm going to show you why this isn't saying that Jesus was a sinner. So let's start with the book of Hebrews. This is Hebrews chapter 1, and it's specifically verse 5. So just for a bit of context, in the book of Hebrews, this is, especially in the beginning, the writer is introducing us to Jesus and why he's so great, basically, right? And in verse 5, it says here, for unto which of the angels, so what angel did God ever say at any time, you are my son, this day have I begotten you, and again I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. So like I mentioned, the beginning of Hebrews is outlining to us, showcasing to us why Jesus is so special, right? Ultimately, it's a powerful passage which presents Jesus as God in a powerful way. One of the arguments that is presented here is, when did God ever say to any angel, you are my son? That's a Old Testament reference to Psalm chapter 2. And then it also says in the passage, as we read, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. So this is a reference to 2 Samuel chapter 7, which I'm going to show you in a moment. But this is where this question of, well, this is a passage applied to Jesus. And as we look at the passages I'll show you in a moment, if this passage is saying that this person is a sinner, then Hebrews inadvertently is by accident saying that Jesus is a sinner. Just for sake of time, I'm not going to read this whole passage. You can read this in your own time. We're going to look at a couple of verses here, just to kind of give you the flavor. Basically, God is sending a message to King David, and we're going to look at a couple of verses here just to help you understand this, and then I'll break this down. So God is already speaking, but just picking up at verse 13, it says, he shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. Right? This is that reference from in Hebrews. And this is the part here. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. But my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. According to all these words and according to all this vision, so did Nathan speak unto David. So the reason I read it beyond verse 14, just to kind of give you context, it will help you understand this passage. So this is the prophet Nathan going to David and giving him this promise, this powerful promise from God, right? This is obviously talking about the son. Now, because in verse 14 it says, if he commits iniquity, I will chasten him. The argument was something along the lines of, well, Hebrews 1:5 is mentioning this passage here in 2 Samuel chapter 7 and applying it to Jesus, saying this is a promise which Jesus is the fulfillment of. But in that passage, it says, if he commits iniquity. So doesn't that mean that Jesus committed some sort of iniquity and he was obviously punished, etc.? Now it should start to make sense for one of the reasons why I kept reading. Notice in verse 15 it says, my mercy, God is speaking, shall not depart away from him, from this son, as I took it away from Saul, whom I put away before you. The reason this is a significant verse, is powerful, is because this prophecy, this command, had a direct fulfillment, which is talking about Solomon, who's coming after. This is why it's referencing Saul, King Saul, because for King David, he was the second king of Israel. Before King David, we had King Saul. And God, as he said in that passage, moved King Saul out of the way because King Saul wasn't obedient, basically. And God said, okay, time's up for King Saul. I'm going to choose a man after my own heart, which is King David. He raised up King David, and this is where God is saying to him, I'm not going to, if this son commits iniquity, I'm not going to move him out of the way and start with another king and his lineage, like I did with King Saul. The point is, first and foremost, there's a literal, practical, direct application of this prophecy, which is from King David to King Solomon, right? This is where this passage about iniquity would apply, because we know as we read on in the Bible in 2 Samuel into 1 Kings, King Solomon fell away for a time in his life and God judged him. God even took some of the kingdom away from David's lineage, but said, different to Saul, I'm not going to remove the kingdom from Saul. I'm not going to remove the kingdom from David as I did from Saul. I'm going to keep a part of the kingdom available for Solomon. That's the direct. I keep saying direct, but even that, I don't even like that word, to be honest, because it can kind of give sort of the wrong interpretation. But fast forward now into the future, right? Solomon was a type, a representation of that true son who's going to come at some point in the future, whose kingdom will rule and reign forever. Solomon's kingdom ran out, it expired. And this is where the fulfillment, this is where understanding how the Old Testament passage and how Jews views the Old Testament as the Messiah being the fulfillment of all of these promises, right? Just as Israel is the son, the Messiah is the son in the greater sense. Just as Israel is taken out of Egypt, right? The Messiah is taken out of Egypt. This is what you see all the way throughout the New Testament, right? Where the Old Testament is preparing us with these types and these shadows, Christ comes along onto the scene and fulfills it in this greater sense. So where Solomon, if he committed iniquity, God would chasten him. Christ is the ultimate fulfillment of this sense. He had no iniquity. He had no sin, but he was still chastised, but not for the sins of himself, but for the sins of the world. That is the point. So Hebrews, by quoting 2 Samuel, isn't saying that Jesus sinned inadvertently by mistake, not understanding the context of the passage. Just like Jews in the first century understood how passages were applied, one of the ways they would apply prophecies and things from the Old Testament, or understand things from the Old Testament, would be a literal fulfillment. So Solomon is literally fulfilling this promise from David. But beyond also just a direct fulfillment, they also had a practical application of passages. How can this apply personally to us right now? They also had a metaphorical, right? Which is, okay, cool. This means one thing, but there's something greater. Basically just a type foreshadowing something greater. And then they had like a secret interpretation, which is like a mystical, like this is something, there's something deep within this which we don't fully understand. There was at least 4 different ways that they interpreted passages. This would be more in line with the third way, which is, okay, this is a type. This is showcasing something which is preparing us for something far greater. Solomon is a temporary example of Christ who's going to come after and fulfill this in its entirety. So hopefully that helps you understand the different ways the New Testament and just Jews in the first century understood things in the Old Testament. And hopefully you can see that this isn't the writer of the Hebrews making a blunder and basically inadvertently saying Jesus had sin. It's not saying that at all. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on another video. And if you've got any Bible questions you want me to answer, feel free to leave them in the comment sections below. God bless.